Hi, welcome back to Christine's Home Affairs. I promised you a quicker video for the Helping Hands card holders that I make, and this is what we're doing today. You know, I was surprised to find out how much I actually sell of these. And I don't really enjoy making them, so I'm trying to force myself to really love making them. And I really should love making them because of the amount of income that it actually creates for me. These card holders are free for me to make, apart from my time, of course. So the only thing that is in there are DVDs or CDs. If you don't have access to those, you can use cereal boxes, just cut some cardboard into circles, and buttons. Some of these are dirty old buttons that I found in a box, and then we have fabric. In my previous two videos, one I showed you how to do these by machine and another one how to do these by hand. We used regular material and we used a wadding for them. This time around I'm going to be using upholstery fabric, and if you remember a few months back I did a video on all those sample swatches that I received. Well, I've decided I'm actually using the sample swatch fabrics for all of my future card holders, and they've already started to prove popular in the shop. I said to you I was going to show you a quicker way of making these card holders. There's no really super quick way of doing these. If you've got if you've got one of those machines that will cut circles for you, then that will probably save you some time. By using upholstery fabric or scrap fabric, or even fabric that is thicker, rather than having to pad it yourself, that saves some time, and just in the way it's stitched together it's just slightly quicker. So stick around and I'll show you how to make these Helping Hands card holders just a fraction quicker than I was making them in the previous videos. Before we get started, I just want to mention the thread that I'll be using. I'm going to show you the difference between three different threads to begin with. This one here is just a cheap regular sewing cotton, just a regular sewing cotton that you would use in your dressmaking. This black one is a Gutermann top stitch thread, so it's very, very strong. And this here is another really strong thread, and I've been using this to do most of my Helping Hands recently. You can see the thickness of the thread. The white one, or the cream one, is very thin compared to the black and the khaki. The black and the khaki are about the same thickness. What I've done here is I've just taken the three threads and I'm going to show you the strength in the three of them. So the first one is the regular sewing thread. I've actually got that doubled. I'm just going to hold that taut there, give that a tug and see if I can break it. And you can see that that breaks fairly easily. So that's not going to be any good for our project. The next one is this khaki coloured thread. I think it might be a linen thread, I'm not really sure, but this is what I've been using. So I'll try and break this one. And apart from cutting into my fingers, it's not doing anything. So this one is just not breaking. And the next one is the Gutermann top stitch thread, which I have used for this project before as well. You can see that this is a really strong thread to use as well. So the Gutermann top stitch thread as a single thread isn't going to break as easily as that white one did either. So whether you use the Gutermann top stitch thread or any other top stitch thread, or just some really strong linen thread, give it a really good pull test. If you can break it, don't use it for this project. The Helping Hands that I'm going to be doing today are made with this sample swatch fabric. So it's upholstery fabric that I get for nothing, and they're just big sample cards with fabric glued to the card. So that's what I'm using today, and for me that is going to eliminate the need for the pallin or the wadding that I was using in the previous one. I'm trying to save a lot of time. This is a textured fabric or a flocked fabric. If I were to use regular sample fabrics, I would probably still need to put some kind of batting on the back of it just to give it some padding. Because this fabric is quite textured, I don't think I need to. So these are some I've done with the same sort of upholstery fabrics. I only just started making them with this fabric last week, but they've already started selling. Rather than wasting time cutting out wadding, I'm going to make them with these sample swatch fabrics because I have so many of them, and it might encourage me to start making more of them. Okay, let's get started. You want a really sharp needle with a decent eye so that you can thread your thicker thread, and it's got to have a really good sharp point. The first thing we need to do is mark our circles. So we're going to be using DVDs or CDs. So this is a great way to recycle the old CDs and DVDs. What we want is a piece of fabric that is 1 inch or 2.5 centimetres bigger than the finished size of our DVD. So we want to have 1 inch all the way around the DVD or CD. You want to find a bowl that is about 1 inch bigger than your CD or DVD. Place that over the top of your fabric, and with a contrast marker, mark the circle like that. And then you can see that this DVD fits nicely inside. So we'll have our seam allowance coming around like this, and that will be drawn in. And even though we're going to have raw edges all the way around, it'll never be seen. So because I'm using these swatch fabrics, a lot of the times you can just pull the fabric off the card. This one's not going to be any good to me because I can't get this sticker off, but the next one will be a nice one. This off. If you can't get the fabric off just by pulling it, turn it around the other side, take the iron to the white section here, and it's got a glue, and it'll actually start releasing that glue. So as you heat it up, pull the fabric off, and you'll just keep on going until you remove all of the pieces of fabric. It's too hot for the iron today. It's going to be about 38 degrees Celsius here today, so I'm not bringing the iron out. So I'm going to pull off some of these, and then we'll start cutting up our fabric. Now, with all the previous card holders that I've made, I used the same fabric on the front and on the back. There's actually really no need to do that. The whole purpose of making these was to use up DVDs or CDs that were going to landfill, use up any old buttons that you might have found, and use up old remnants of fabric or fabric that you've been able to rescue. So it doesn't matter if you don't have enough fabric for the back and the front. I think it adds to the interest if you actually have different fabrics. So I've got 2 different blacks. I'm going to have one on the front and one on the back, and I'll do the same for my reds. I'll keep the same family of swatch fabrics together, but I won't worry about the colours. I've marked a circle on one layer. So pin as many together as you can, but still make it easy enough for you to cut all the way around. Whether you're going to use a rotary cutter or scissors, it doesn't matter. But to save on time, layer enough pieces of fabric that you can actually cut the circles out at the same time. Your circles don't need to be perfectly cut because they're going to be shaped over a perfectly round object, so any discrepancies won't be seen. Grab one that you've already cut out, and rather than drawing another circle, just place that over the top, pin it in place, and use that as your template to cut out the next lot of circles. I'm not even worrying about the glue bits that are on the side here because, again, they're going to be folded underneath. We've got enough circles cut out now to make 2 card holders. And we need 2 DVDs for each card holder that we're making. I still want to use 2 strands of thread, but what I'm going to do, rather than cutting the thread to size, I've wound some thread onto a bobbin, and I also have the cone. That way I can just separate the 2 threads without having to cut individual pieces of thread and wasting all that thread. Once you've got the 2 strands of thread through the eye of your needle, leave a really long tail. I'm not sitting at my sewing machine at the moment, but normally I like to have this sitting on my machine and that sitting on top of my machine as well on the little spool holders, and it just holds it in place while my thread is being drawn through. So you can use a bowl or a cup, place your thread into a bowl there, and as you're using it, it'll just come off like that instead of jumping about on your table. So don't cut your thread off. We've got the 2 strands through the eye of the needle, and we've got a nice long tail as well. And now we can start sewing about 1/4 of an inch in from the outside edge. It doesn't have to be perfect. As you draw the cord in, it's going to sit nicely on your DVD. It's better if you can use a longer needle. That way you can load up your needle. You just go in and out, pull your thread until you think you might have enough to go around. Doesn't matter if you don't, because you've still got that really long tail. Now that we've come back to the beginning, move that thread out of the way. We want to take the needle down, come up just near where that thread has come up. We don't want to go through that because we still need to be able to pull on that later. So just come up beside it or just before it, grab your DVD, and we still have our really long tail of thread here. What we want is about 4 inches of tail on the end of the needle. So with the thread that's still on the bobbin and the cone, hold the DVD in place, pull this until you only have about 4 inches of thread left on your needle. Now remember I said to you to be careful to make sure you don't thread through those stitches. I actually came too close, and so I've just pulled out the last stitch and I'm just going to come back up beside it. I'm going to leave probably about 1/8 of an inch away from the first stitch that I created. So my needle's coming up just in there, but my other thread is over this side. You need to be able to have them separate so that you can draw your thread through. If the thread is pierced in any way, you won't be able to pull your thread. So once you can get started, press down, pull that thread until you have about 4 inches of thread left. So with the thread tail that's on your needle, we're going to knot this. So go into the fabric, come back up. You've got a loop here. We're going to go through the loop twice. And by going through the loop twice, you're ensuring that you actually get a knot. And there we are. I do like to do that again. So I'm going to go into the fabric, up again, and do another double loop. Then we can knot that and we can take our needle away. So that's not going to go anywhere. We still have our thread attached to the cone and our bobbin. Center your fabric so that it's evenly placed, and then just keep pulling until everything's nice and taut. And this way is a little bit easier than the previous ways that I've been doing it because you've knotted the thread at one end, so you're only actually having to put pressure onto one end of thread. The other one is tied off with the 2 strands. So pull that really tight. Just put your finger there to hold it in place. Take those 4-inch ends that you had earlier, place that through the thread that you've got tension on at the moment, and this is just going to be a very loose knot, but it'll enable you to actually now pull both of these away from each other to create some nice tension, and it's much easier on your hands. So give it another loop, give it a good pull, and if there's no movement in the thread, then you can cut your thread. I do like to go just one more time, so I've triple knotted that and I can cut my thread, and I haven't wasted any excess thread because it's still attached to my bobbin and my cone. So then I can just go and load up my needle for the next one and go through and do exactly the same thing. Even this out, and there's a nice neat circle. So it really doesn't matter that the stitches on this side aren't even. When you put the other DVD over the top, you're not going to see any of that fabric showing underneath. So I'll load up my needle again and do the next one. And remember, you don't need to knot the tail end. My DVDs are completely covered and I'm ready now to put the 2 layers together. So all we need to do is just sandwich them together like this. And to keep them together, we want to put a button in the middle on both sides. The buttons are a decorative feature, but they also help keep the card holders together. I've got some buttons here, and it doesn't matter what color or size buttons you use. I used to actually put the same buttons on each side, but now I'm finding it difficult to find buttons that match. This one's got 2 holes. This one's got 4 holes. What I'll do if I can't find buttons that are around about the same size or 2 holes, I'll stitch the 2 holes first and then I'll stitch the other 2 holes with the 2 hole buttons. So they're 2 different types of blacks. It doesn't matter what size or shape button you use, as long as they're a flat button and not a shanked button. Take some thread, and I've folded a length of thread in half, so I've got 2 strands there, and there's the fold with a loop. We're going to put the folded edge of the thread through the eye of the needle. So with your thread folded in half, we're going to fold that in half again. So we're going to have a nice long length. In total, you'll have 4 strands of thread. So I've got the 4 strands of thread there. To knot your thread, you'll have the end to be knotted in one hand and the needle in the other hand. Just pinch your needle between thumb and forefinger and pinch this thread between thumb and forefinger as well whilst you're holding the needle. Holding onto that thread, take your thread, loop it around your needle once, loop it around your needle twice, and then using your thumbnail, just hold that thread in place. So I've got that thread looped underneath and I'm holding that in place. And now I'm just going to pull my needle up and keep pulling that thread gently until it gets to the end. Then you have a knot at the end. Just a really quick, easy way to knot your thread. Okay, let's put these together. So we want to have a button in the center here. Grab one of your card holders, place your thread in the center there and come up, grab a button, choose which side you like the best and center that button over the top. Take your other card holder, place your button where you want it, and then you can come straight down, going all the way through all the layers and come up on the other side there. Grab your next button and pop that on as well. And I'm just still holding on to this one. And then just come through this one again and find the hole on the other side. Come up again. So now what you've got is the button being stitched through on both sides. Line up the CDs so that they're nice and even. You don't want them off center like that. You want them over the top of each other neatly, and the buttons will just find each other here. And you don't want to pull it so tight that you're going to snap the DVD inside. So just pull it gently, hold the button underneath in place, come back down, go find the other hole. And you'll do this a few times. And if you don't do it too tightly, then it's going to be easier for you to find the hole, and it'll also be easier for you to tie off your thread. Now when we're ready to tie off the thread, you can just bring your needle in under the thread just here, loop through the thread twice, and you need to loop through it twice because it won't knot otherwise. Pull that taut, and then you can do that again. Just come through and do another loop. When you've done that, come around on the other side, do the same thing again, needle through the thread, loop it a couple of times and do it one more time, and then you can cut the thread. And we're all done. And repeat that for the other one. And there you go, a couple more helping hands card holders completely finished, made out of upholstery fabric swatch samples. Okay, so I still haven't decided if I love making them or not. We're starting to bond. Chris and I get a lot of DVDs given to us when people are cleaning out houses. They're just throwing them out. So we get loads of these, and we've actually got a tower out in the driveway that is stacked this high just with CDs and DVDs. So you can imagine I've got a lot of sewing to do, although Chris does want to make a lamp with them. I found this to be a little bit quicker using the upholstery fabric, and it also gave me another idea to use up that upholstery fabric because I've got so much of it. I didn't know what else to do with it. With the ones that have a more of a brushed feel or a little bit thicker texture to it, they're going to be perfect for these card holders. They'll be quicker to cut out too because I don't have thin pieces of fabric and I don't have to worry about cutting out any batting. I'm having trouble sourcing buttons. I've gone through nearly all of the ones that I've had that are not shanked buttons, so that's going to be my next problem, is sourcing some buttons. And by using the thread a little bit differently, having it sitting on cones and coming off your machine or coming out of a bowl and having two separate strands coming out, well, it saved me a lot of thread wastage because I found that I would cut off lengths of thread, stitch around, and whatever was cut off after that would be wasted. I might have got another round out of it. By just having the two threads coming off the spool separately and not cutting anything, it did help save a little bit of time, and also just in the tying it off, it made it a lot easier on my hands as well. So I found it much easier to tie those threads off when I had one piece already secured to the fabric rather than having to tug at both sections of it at the same time, which really cut into your fingers. Hopefully I can learn to love making these. When I first started making these, I was selling them for $12 each. I didn't think they were worth very much, but because they do take a little while with the hand stitching, I ended up putting my prices up. Normally, if I'm doing something, my prices go down if I'm not happy with a product. They were a little bit more time consuming, so they went from $12 to $15. I was concerned that I'd have trouble selling them, but I'm really not having any trouble at all. So I sell them for $15 each. I know that I could make at least 3 to 4 sets an hour. It more than covers my hourly rate that I like to pay myself or charge myself out at. So for me, the most practical place to be making these is on the couch when I'm watching a movie. I've been wanting to to try and find quicker ways of doing this, and some people might be wondering why I go to the trouble of putting a button on here. I could save that step and just stitch straight through the DVDs. I've tried that. I've tried stitching through with the sewing machine. You run the risk of breaking your DVDs when you do that, and I have actually tried just hand stitching, going through back and forth, and all it does is creates a divot in the fabric, and it didn't look very appealing. The button needs to be on there. It looks much nicer. It actually does help give it a little bit more support as well, because with the button there, especially if you're using big ones, it helps prevent them from being pulled out a little bit. I mean, if you pull them hard enough, you're going to break them. They really are worth my time to do, especially if I'm just sitting down somewhere in the car, on the couch, even when I'm in the shop in between customers. If I'm just sitting there and I don't have anything else that I particularly need to sew, I can just whip up a whole batch of these. Again, like my shopping bags, I can just have a whole heap of these ready to go, and then I can stitch the buttons on as I need to. And I hope you've enjoyed this video and another use for the sample upholstery fabric swatches. Let me know what you think. Bye for now, and I shall catch you next time. I could have sworn I had another card holder to show you, and I've just come out on the deck and look at this. I've got a whole heap of cards out here. There's one of my helping hands, and I'm just going to show you this guilty little girl. What's this, Coco? She's hidden. What's this? Guilty or what? Hey? What's this? This girl has never been in trouble in her life, so I don't know how she knows that she's done the wrong thing. Hey, what's this? Cheeky little thing. Well and truly hidden under there. She must have gone and pinched that while I was having a nap.